Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, is Joe Biden on the ballot? Also, the V Team takes a look at the state of Alabama prisons. And Mo Brooks got in some hot water after January 6th.
Smile, you son of a...
Oh, Mo, there she blows. Out with a bang. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and today I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, Charlie Walker, associate and assistant editor at APR. Gave you 2 promotions right there.
Thank you so much.
And Josh Moon, columnist at APR, investigative journalist, and all-around good guy. Hey, y'all.
Nice.
Hi.
Nice.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
How do I get one of those promotions like Charlie just got?
I don't know.
I keep getting demoted, so I can't help you, dude.
Yeah. She won't let me say that she was a New York Times freelancer. She won't.
Oh, yeah.
She won't go with that anymore. Evidently, New York Times is now persona non grata.
Just a little bit.
All right, so whatever that's all about. Hey, Josh, you know who was almost persona non grata was Mo Brooks after January 6th and his fiery speech at the Ellipse, where he was Elmer Fudd Gantry, bringing down hell and fury on the Capitol. Seems like Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader of the Republican caucus in the House, didn't like what he heard.
No, he didn't. There are more of these text messages and tapes and things that continue to flow out from the January 6th investigation that's been ongoing now for a while. And they were behind the scenes very upset with Mo Brooks, with Barry Moore. They were unhappy with a lot of their Republican colleagues that went, they felt, a step too far, which, I always wondered what a step too far was for Kevin McCarthy, but apparently Mo Brooks found it. It's very telling, I think, when you look at these conversations, these raw conversations that they were having, unencumbered, out of the public spotlight, no spin on anything. They were pretty adamant that the President of the United States was partly responsible for what took place on January 6th, and some others had contributed greatly to this sort of thing, and that they felt like it was going to hurt them going forward in the future because of the way they behaved. And, it hadn't really played out that way to this point. I don't know that there are a lot of people holding them accountable for what took place, but hopefully with more of this stuff coming out, some of that will start to change.
I mean, Susan, would not it be helpful for democracy as a whole if these men and women in the Republican Party said publicly what they know to be true privately?
Well, on the tapes that have been released, McCarthy was so angry that he wanted to actually ask President Trump to resign.
Right.
He wanted to strip Mo Brooks and this other representative of all of their committee standings. He really wanted to do it, and what he did in the end was nothing.
Nothing.
No.
And now is even denying that the tapes exist when the New York Times has them.
Well, that was one of the great ones I liked. He said, "Oh no, this is all fake news, blah blah blah." And the reporters went, "Well, as a matter of fact, we've got the tape, right?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be careful when you question a reporter. We always know the answer before we ask the question.
Josh and Susan, I know this. How many times have you asked the question, you already knew the answer and you had the backup information?
I've lost count. I'm sitting there with the paperwork in my hand.
It's roughly 90% of the time. Honestly, it is. And I mean, I'd say this, though. In today's world, Nixon would be just fine. He could just go on TV later and claim that the tapes were fake. I didn't really say that you heard me say. Not at all.
No, it's not real. It's fake news, fake news. But we all know most reporters know before they report such things.
Oh, no, of course. No, but what really got me about this whole thing was what Barry Moore said. Because when I first read it, I was like, surely that, I'm taking it the wrong way. But, when it came to the arrest after January 6th, we have to confront this. I was like, surely he means it in a good... No, he doesn't. He wants to...
I mean, Barry Moore came off like the Barry Moore we know, who absolutely knows nothing, will say anything, and just generally is clueless, Josh.
Isn't Barry Moore becoming more of a verb these days?
Barry Moore is a verb. Okay.
Barry Moore it again.
Okay. Yeah. What were you saying, Josh?
Yeah, he's one of the people that you almost can't get angry at because you know that he actually believes this fairy tale. The other folks, are lying about these sorts of things. But I'm not sure that Mo Brooks and Barry Moore don't actually believe the nonsense that they say. That they've bought into this fairy tale and they're so blinded by the partisanship in their brain that they can't comprehend anything that falls outside of that narrative that they've created. I mean, which is a completely false thing that's come about here. It's really kind of absurd and ridiculous that we're still talking about this at this point. A lot of these people should have been in jail. The Republicans should have handled their business and got them the hell out of Congress. I mean, that's what they tried to overthrow democracy. Let's not. I mean, I know there are a lot of jokes to be made, but they were overthrowing democracy.
Mist. It's like they have this little mist around their head. It's like a little cloud, kind of.
Little cloud. Okay. The whole thing is they live in this world, and I think it was Justice Brandeis, where they're terrified of witches, so they burn women, right? I mean, that's the kind of guys they are. We got about a minute and a half, Susan. I want to move on to this next thing. The one thing we are seeing is I did not know that Joe Biden was on the ballot.
I didn't see his name.
Everybody seems to be running against Joe Biden. Joe Biden this, Joe Biden that. I mean, where's Joe Biden?
Nobody's running against each other. It's like the other candidates in the races don't exist. And they're just everybody's focused on Joe Biden to avoid talking about anything. They're not talking about policy. They're not talking about what they're doing. That's a good way of running a
They
campaign.
think they can ride that to a victory.
I mean, it's a
voter problem. It's a voter problem. It's what it is. Because they know that policy is not as effective as fear. And so they have a loud megaphone every night at Fox News or whatever other cable network these people are watching that is trying to scare the hell out of them about what's happening at the border or inflation or whatever with Joe Biden. And so they're just going to ride that instead of actually discussing things that matter in the everyday lives of Alabamians, which should be much more important to the voters, but it's not. It's the other thing. And so they're doing what voters want them to do.
Well, I mean, there's plenty to criticize President Biden on. You don't have to make up stuff. But the general feeling I get is that because we've nationalized politics, Tip O'Neill used to say all politics is local. It is not anymore, Susan. We've got about 15 seconds, but it really is national.
It hasn't been for several years because it works. It works. If the local candidates are targeting national figures, the voters respond, and they see it works.
They know what's happening in Washington, D.C. They have no idea what's happening in Montgomery. All right, you're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
President Trump says
no teacher should ever be allowed to teach transgender to our children.
Yet Kay Ivey is allowing Alabama tax dollars to be spent on schools designed specifically for transgender students. Ivey could have stopped funding the transgender school, but didn't. Like Trump, Lindy Blanchard says no transgender education of minors. She'll end funding for transgender schools and put the money directly into the classroom.
So you got caught speeding. But this time you got more than a ticket.
What are you in for?
Vehicular homicide.
Stop speeding before speeding stops you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
I'm Donald Trump, and I love Alabama. As many of you know, there are few issues facing our nation as important as election integrity and election fraud. This is why the people of the great state of Alabama must work together to make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. So get out, register to vote, and get a photo ID so you can make your voice heard and decide the future of our great country. Thank you.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Well, there was some candidate bashing this past week. Anyway, 6 of the contenders running against Governor Kay Ivey got together for a forum. And Charlie, you're going to love this. They held it at the Roto-Rooter Center.
Oh, I love that. That's pretty fitting. A lot of them kind of remind me of that gunk you find at the bottom of the drain. So,
Anyway, they met at the Roto-Rooter Center and they had an event and, everybody was there except Governor Ivey and Dean Young. So they had to keep, the idiot down in the village. And that wasn't Kay.
No.
But Josh,
what the hell was Dean Young doing that he couldn't make it to the forum? What did he have going on in his life?
I don't know. Maybe he was doing something with, maybe he was running for some other office we don't know about. But anyway, Susan, they got together, Lindy Blanchard, Tim James, Lou Burdett, Dean Odle, Flat Earth Dean, and they had a forum. And as I said, if you had a forum, a candidate debate, and nobody came, did it really happen? But some people came. But the real question is, did it matter?
Apparently not. Basically, They just bashed Kay Ivey over the COVID response and masks and, talked about the soul of the nation. It didn't seem to accomplish anything as far as, what policies they had, what ideas they had, just basically kind of sitting up there and, patting each other on the back.
No, it's crazy and then wouldn't even, not even taking into consideration probably the thousands of lives Ivey saved by issuing that mandate in the first place by making us all wear masks.
Yeah.
If we had just been, free balling it, no mask the whole time, we probably would have had a lot more,
It was bad enough as it was.
Exactly.
With the masks.
Exactly.
Josh, a freedom from tyranny. That's a 3-inch piece of cloth, right?
It is. And so I gotta say, I hate it when Charlie's here because she steals all my words. She had the gunk at the bottom of the drain. She had free balling it just a second ago. I don't get to say anything good anymore.
I'm sorry,
but
man.
It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. What gets me about these guys is that they're all kind of on the same track. They're kind of just different shades of the same candidate. Because they're all basically attacking Ivey for the same things. And it would seem as though maybe if you wanted to make yourself stand out, you could be the person that I'm more disappointed in Lindy Blanchard than anybody because she has a good story. She has a good story that she can lean on, and she has people and experience in things that she could tout, and she has ideas about. Like I've heard her talk about these things, and it seems like she's gotten sucked into this thing of attacking Ivey because they want to covet the far right, and it seemed like a better course of action for at least somebody would have been to say, hey, here are my policy ideas. Why don't we talk about what's going on with the state in these certain ways and why we're spending $400 million, $1.3 billion on prisons instead of on education and healthcare. Those sorts of things I think would have made somebody stand out, and they're just not doing it. They're all doing the same thing.
Well, I think one candidate did, in fact, stand out to me, and I'm not going to call out any names because I like most of these people, but one candidate, Susan, said that only 2 nations in the history of the world had ever come into existence with a covenant between God. And the candidate said those 2 nations were Israel and the United States of America. Now, I do somewhat remember George Washington coming down from Mount Vernon with the 15 or 10 commandments and brought the country into being, right? I mean, that's part of our living history.
Yeah.
And you know what's scary?
Yeah.
He votes. Also, I mean, the ignorance of some of these people of how our government works is astounding, and they're running for office.
I mean, Josh, as far as I remember, the Constitution and the founding of the country had more to do with the Enlightenment period and Burkean, philosophy, and a lot less to do with what, was going on in the Old Testament. But maybe I missed something.
No, I think religious freedom was a pretty big component of the founding fathers' ideas for this place. And a separation of church and state, and it's really weird how we've combined religion and governance as we've moved forward. And so many people like to pretend that was the original ideas of the founding fathers when, they wrote stuff down. You can go back and read what they were talking about during that time. And that was not it, man. It was, matter of fact, it was mostly the opposite of that. They were religious people, but they had ideas for this country that do not identify with what we're doing now.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with God and country. What my problem is don't make that you have to have this certain religion to have a government or a country.
Well, there's one person told you one day, and I think it was an email, that Democrats can't be Christians.
Right.
They can't be Christians. What?
Right.
I mean, the founding of this country came as a break, part of it as a break from the Church of England. And now we've wrapped all the government back in that little bubble of religion because it seems to work with the voters.
That's what I'm saying. For some reason,
not the intention.
I mean, part of the country was founded on freedom from religion,
exactly.
not freedom to.
Well, I just know that the ultimate liberal is probably Jesus Christ. So,
Well, if you read the red bits, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have.
Because he loves, not hates.
We're going to run out of time here, but there's been a lot of talk about cutting the gas tax, and one of the new report coming out of the Urban Institute shows that cutting the gas tax temporarily makes people feel good, but it doesn't really ease the pain at the pump.
Right. It doesn't mean that the merchants have to actually cut the gas prices.
No, right.
Just because they're not having to pay the gas tax. You're still paying the same amount for gas.
Exactly.
But the merchant is getting out from not having to pay that tax. So,
Josh, 20 seconds. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I understand the point. I understand the point from the other side as well. I heard a really good argument for this the other day that one of the things Biden should do to ease this up is incentivize more work from home and remote working opportunities for people, incentivize companies to do that, which would cut down on travel and would ease us back where we were during the pandemic to an extent, where there wasn't so much travel out there, and that would cut gas usage and would ultimately cut prices.
That's right. All right, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics.
You'll never guess what 400,000 people in the U.S. were using when they crashed their cars last year. No, not this. This. Distracted driving will kill you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
I have to do it because, I keep thinking about that they held this debate at the Roto-Rooter Center and talked about cutting gas. Could they have gas taxes, I guess? Charlie, what?
Oh, nothing. I was just giggling at you. I'm sorry.
I just somehow I found that amusing.
I believe one of our panelists brought up during the break that there's certainly a lot of gas there.
A lot of gas, a lot of hot air, a lot of hot air.
There's definitely gas there. Ain't no doubt about that.
Well, they talked about cutting the gas tax. That's what made me think about it at the Roto-Rooter Center. All right, Alabama signed its first prison contract earlier, a couple of weeks ago on April 15th. But we haven't been able to get the contract yet, Josh, because it has to be redacted, and that's understandable that has to be redacted. But you brought up the fact that, this is the first of the two prisons that we're certainly going to build here. And this prison is going to be in, Elmore County? Elmore County, where we're going to have this one. And this is supposed to ease the prison overcrowding, but also provide better medical services, better mental health services, and all that. We all can agree with that, but there's still the enormous price tag that you brought up earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I'll say, I don't know that we necessarily agree on it easing the overcrowding issue.
No.
Because it's not, I mean, there's going to be less capacity overall. Now, I know that they say that because of the way they're going to design the pods and everything else, it's going to make it better in terms of security and oversight of the prisoners. But you have a ton, thousands, into the thousands of prisoners that are being housed currently at county facilities. And so once these things are built, the idea is a lot of those guys are going to head to state prisons where they're supposed to be, and that's going to have you're going to have some real issues with overcrowding again. But I understand the need for the prisons, or at least for upgrades. I think a lot of people felt like there was a more comprehensive approach to this that could have been taken that would have served everybody a little bit better, would have spread funds around to different county facilities and different state facilities that are in desperate need of these things, and would have addressed some of the things that are currently being talked about in that federal lawsuit, most of which we don't address with these new federal prisons. And once this is done, the appetite for doing more isn't going to be there.
Well, Susan, you and I have toured prisons a bunch.
Excuse me.
They are certainly inhumane. I am in favor of new prisons, but Josh is right. They won't do anything for overcrowding. But what I was referring to was the better health care facilities, better mental health facility, hoping that
Well, the facility, it's one thing to have the facilities, but it's another thing to have the programs.
Right.
You can have the facilities all you want to, but if you don't have effective programs to use those facilities correctly, you've wasted your money. So they need to be looking at not only the facilities themselves, but also the programs that are going to involve better treatment of our prisoners.
Charlie, you wanted to weigh in there?
Oh yeah, no, I just and that's wonderful. I really hope that they do that. That the mental health, their quality of life, all that improves. But for some reason, I don't know, my mind just keeps going back to the people who shouldn't be in the prison in the first place. We're getting a big flashy new prison, but there are people in there who should have gotten a slap on the wrist. And it's just that I can't let that go out of my head.
Well, and I think, this is what goes back to, and Josh, you can weigh in on this, sentencing reform, community corrections activities. These are important things that Representative Jim Hill has tried to get through, former judge of St. Clair County. Also, Chris England has tried to get through. The point that Charlie, is making is that, some of these folks don't need to be there. They need to be in other alternative programs.
Right, and I think that bears out because a lot of the people that we have in there are in the work programs and work release programs that we send out to public places every day to work. And so, I think the general feeling is if we're comfortable enough to send those guys out pretty much unsupervised into the general public and have them perform jobs and tasks around and do various things. I mean, you got folks working around the governor's mansion doing landscaping, all sorts of different things. And so if that's the case, you're kind of getting into an issue there with forced labor at some point. But more than that, there were good reforms presented by people who have worked through this system for a long time. Jim Hill. I don't think anybody would call Jim Hill light on crime. Jim Hill.
Not if you know him.
So if he's pushing for reforms because he sees an issue there, I think that's somebody that you need to listen to. And fighting him tooth and nail has been our Attorney General, who seems to be perfectly fine with it, keeping everybody locked the hell up simply because it helps his image as a tough on crime guy.
Let's don't get into the fact of how tough our Attorney General actually is.
Yeah.
I've been in the courtroom when Jim
pretty close to breaking the law
said
himself.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you, Josh.
That's okay. We're going to need to move on to the next subject. One of the things that I want to bring up, and I think this is extremely important, is that I believe in being tough on crime. Mm-hmm. I do believe in being tough on crime. I do not believe in being inhumane to people who commit crimes. Inhumane. Mm-hmm. Now, we've had several correctional officers sentenced, indicted, imprisoned for beating inmates, beating incarcerated people. We have an incident where a guy, they were handcuffed. Two inmates were handcuffed, and he beat the crap out of them, and other officers and supervisors stood by and watched it, Susan. Mm-hmm. That is inhumane treatment. That's not being tough on crime. That's being a criminal.
Yeah, and they were not resisting. They weren't doing anything. He beat them with a baton, from my understanding. Yeah. And then falsified the reports about the incident. So, and this is our APR's reporter, Eddie Burkhalter, has discovered several instances of this. I realize that these correctional officers are frustrated. I realize, that they're overwhelmed, but there is no reason to beat handcuffed men to that degree or at all, for that matter.
And this happens far too often.
Josh, look, we got about 5 seconds. Sum it up for us.
At some point, if you're going to take away people's freedoms and ultimately say that you can take away someone's life, you're going to have to maintain the moral high ground in some way, shape, or form. And this is not it. You got to be better than the people that you're locking up. And if you can't do that, then we've got a huge problem.
Well, and we've got more than one bad apple in the correctional system. We need to do better. We're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.